Hey, Pinaki.
How you doing, sir?
Good, good. How are things with you?
Good, hanging in there, trying to just manage it all and keep it all together. What about you? How's this week been for you?
It's been good. My son, he's at that age now where he's finishing off his senior year, and now he's thinking about like the next steps, like what school he wants to go to, university, that kind of a thing. And it's so interesting to see the kids and school and just kind of reliving moments in school. And there's all kinds of personalities. And Pinaki, did you ever have that classmate that was really over the top and obnoxious about trying to impress the teacher and curry favor for good grades and things like that? Did you ever?
Yeah, there's always one of those, right? There's always one of those.
It's kind of funny because I think since we've been in school, I think that's kind of where it starts, where we sort of resent those people that have just such obvious intentions and agendas. And honestly, there's teachers that respond to that, right?
Yeah, no, that's true. It's the kind of like interesting influence that these kids have. Like we actually learned the art of influence and manipulation at a really young age too. So it's pretty wild. And congratulations to your son.
For sure. And, I think today's episode, I think it's going to be a lot of fun kind of talking about managing up and sort of the more problematic versions of that, where it turns into kissing up and sucking up, much like, some of these kids that we went to school with. And I'm sure my son probably has classmates that are the same thing. But I'm excited to welcome everyone to today's episode of, why does it feel so wrong to be human at work? And Pinaki, you and I, we spend a lot of energy in this podcast really examining workplace life and culture and things that often seem normal in the office but make no sense anywhere else. So for those of you that are joining us for the first time, I'm Chris Lee. I'm part of the employee experience and internal communication team at Gallagher Communication, and I'm always joined here by my friend and co-host Pinaki Kathiari. He leads the team at digital communications agency out of New Jersey, Local Wisdom. And we're just here to have some fun and really think about workplace practices or quote unquote best practices and behaviors that, probably deserve a little bit more, introspection and sort of kind of scratching your head. But today's episode is going to be about, why does it feel so wrong to manage up in the workplace?
That's right. It's such an interesting topic. And hello, everybody. I don't know if anybody knows this about me, but I'm a Gemini. So I really like to look at things from like multiple sides. And that's why this topic on managing up is really interesting, because there's multiple sides to it. Like, what you just talked about, Chris, was the classroom, butt kisser? Is that what it's called? The class pet? Is that what it was called? The right?
Teacher's pet.
The teacher's pet. There
Yeah.
you go. That's what it was. And it's funny because that's when, you're quote unquote managing up or influencing when you have a personal agenda, right? Like I want to get good grades so I could have better grades and things like that. So I'm going to influence and play this nice card to get there. And, it's fun because sometimes that happens almost subconsciously. And then there's other times when managing up where you're like, my boss just doesn't know the reality of it, right? Like the boss's ideas are unrealistic and they don't work, so I have to influence and manage up to figure out. And from both of those perspectives, there's a manager's side to it, right? Like, wow, do they really think I'm stupid, right? Like, because like a child to their parent, right? Like I remember once helping my older daughter with a presentation, and she was like, "Stop! You don't know what you're talking about." And I was like, "What? Like, you know how much I get paid for this?" But right. And then on the other side, there's also, I see what's happening here, right? So as teachers get that teacher's pet, they're like, they know what's happening. Like they've seen this before. I can see your agenda, right? So it's fun to look at this topic from multiple angles. And I'm thinking first, like, how do you see managing up and things like that? How does that show up in the workplace?
Yeah. And actually, one thing I was going to say, Pinaki, is that I think part of the reason why we look often in resentful ways at people who are clearly sort of playing that role of
Often resentful ways.
teacher's pet. Yeah. But I think there's that perception that, someone's actively trying to manipulate, the manager. And one of the things that I think is really important for people to remember in today's organizations is, we've made a lot of progress in North America with increasingly diverse teams with a variety of lived experiences and cultural backgrounds for employees. And so
kudos to us for that.
Yeah, 100%. And I think it's important that, I think about sometimes my own ethnic heritage. Both my parents were born in Korea, and the corporate culture in Korea is just so vastly different than corporate culture in North America. It's much more vertical. It's much, it's heavily influenced by Confucian values, where there's a big emphasis on a respect and a very overt respect for hierarchy and authority. And, employees are definitely, there's a lot of pressure for them to show deference to their superiors, and decision-making is very top-down. And I think in Korean corporate culture too, interactions are a lot more formal, with a strong emphasis on using appropriate titles, honorific. There's even a specific language that that people use that is different than informal. So I think with more diverse backgrounds with employees, I think it's important to recognize that in different cultures, there's different ways to manage up as well.
That's right. That's right. Like like there's certain folks like. I could relate also from like Asian backgrounds, and certain folks there's this work ethic that on one side is normal, and on another side it looks like, oh wow, you're just kind of going above and beyond, or you're just trying to steal the show type of thing. And it was just like, this is just normal for us type of thing. So it's things like that could cause like a perception issue, which is a thing, right? And like when you think about managing up altogether, first of all, I'm thinking manage up is just not the right word, because like no one likes to be managed. It just kind of feels wrong, right? But more like we are influencing each other, because that's really what it is. There's a level of like manipulation, influence that's all happening. And I feel like the big picture looks like this: like we're like on a team, and we're all working together to accomplish something. But we're all at different places in the field, right? Like we see different things. We see the play happening in different ways. So we have various experiences that turn into beliefs about what to do next. And the big question then turns into what to do next, right? So we have a leader or manager, right? And they're kind of like, I don't know, sitting at a vantage point to be able to see things that everyone can't see, right? Because they could interface with many different places, both internally or externally or whatnot. They just get a lot of information and a lot of input, right? So, and they could see things that could be a few steps ahead by looking at trends and markets and things like that. And then you have people who are kind of like doing the work and producing on the field or whatnot, right? They're selling to customers, or they're, creating the product or marketing it, doing what have you. And they see some things from their vantage points, and they interface with the ground folks who actually make it happen. So they see things that are breaking, things that need to be patched, and they see opportunities. So I guess managing up and influencing all around is how do we move forward, right? Like, because both sides and all different sides are going to have a different view and have a different view of what should we do next, right?
I really like what you're saying, Pinaki, about how those different perspectives and the different levels of context that leaders and employees bring to the table, I think is it's very important to understand and recognize this, because I think one of the things that holds back employees from saying, well, what about this? Have we thought about this? For managers that have already been privy to conversations and a lot of work's already been done, Sometimes employees can just come across as looking really ignorant, even though obviously they're not going to have that level of information or know what work was done behind the scenes to even get to this conclusion. So a lot of times employees will raise their hands like, this doesn't make sense. And I think that's where it's an opportunity for people managers to be patient and really say, well, yeah, we actually have thought about that, and here's kind of why we are going in this direction instead. But I think that kind of dialogue needs to be encouraged versus sometimes if people aren't willing to be patient and just thoughtfully explain it to employees. And then to your point too, there's things that people on the whether it's on from the employee perspective or if they're on the front line, they're going to be able to see things that are going to be really difficult for leaders and people managers sometimes to understand and appreciate as well. Where employees can definitely bring up things that people managers should be able to sometimes say, you know what, I actually haven't thought about that. I didn't realize that was happening in the stores, or I didn't realize that this was happening with our customers. That's actually a really good, interesting point. And I want to bring this back and maybe revisit it a little bit.
Yeah, because there's kind of two sides or multiple sides, and they want different things. And there's a thing first that comes into introspection here, right? Because there's different reasons why you would try to influence someone, right? Like that's what I was saying earlier, right? Like you're doing something off, or I think is off or wrong, and we're headed for a cliff. I tell you to let's stop and let's do something else. There's also when you have a personal agenda here and whatnot. So looking at it from a person who is looking to influence or manage up, right? Like first, it's kind of like, let's look at your own self, right? Like, do you have a personal agenda that's clouding your judgment is a question that's causing you to not see certain things or giving you like blinders, right? Like, are you more interested in this kind of career path or project or enamored by something other than what's most important right now? I think a long time ago, I remember this story. I gave my UX team like this exercise once, and it was to design this interactive whiteboard that we could have in the office. And they designed something truly amazing and groundbreaking, but totally unaffordable and technically not very feasible at the time. And I had thought that I was apparent with the exercise that it actually had to be doable, but they hadn't thought of that. Why? Because they're artists, they're creatives. They wanted to do something really cool and fulfill this creative itch and thinking about the possibilities. They weren't thinking about the constraints of cash and things like that. So think about the influence you have and why you're making that influence, right? And I'd say always, let's go after things that are win-win-win. It's corny. It's a nod to The Office and Michael Scott. But the idea is, let's find ways where you can win, your boss could win, the organization could win, the community would win, right? So let's think about it from that perspective first when it comes to thinking about managing up, and especially when you think you might have a personal agenda. That makes sense?
Yeah, it totally does. One of the principles that I found really interesting in understanding how to manage different personality types, managers, because at the end of the day, not everyone is on the same footing as a leader in terms of maturity, in terms of personality type, those kinds of things. And so there's this really interesting book that actually my son, speaking of my son again, that he has been reading. It's called The 48 Laws of Power by Robert Greene. And one of the principles that's in this is never outshine the master, which I've always thought it just feels vaguely counterintuitive, because when you think about how we think about our roles, we just want to do the best job we possibly can. And we're not actually really thinking about whether or not it might actually show up our boss. But the reality is that different leader types might actually feel threatened or envious, or they might have their pride wounded if one of their team members actually is showing up in ways that are just better than them. I just had lunch yesterday actually with a colleague here at Gallagher who was telling me that earlier in his career, he actually was part of a round of layoffs, and it was clear to people that the people that posed a threat to one of the leaders were among those that were let go to sort of fortify that person's role. So
Hmm.
I do think it's really important that people resist the temptation to be kind of naive about, just my work should speak for itself, and I should get these opportunities, and just focusing on doing the good work, and remembering to think about the dynamic of personalities as well,
Hmm.
because I think that's going to play a really big role in terms of people's trajectories within organizations and their ability to be successful.
Yeah, exactly. When you're trying to kind of influence someone, and it's the kind of going about it with like, yeah, you're doing it wrong is not going to bode well. That'll immediately put up like defensive barriers and things like that. And so, like, you're right. Like managers or leaders have to be like open to it. And it's an interesting thing I've seen. I guess understanding the dynamics of like leadership, right? They're being asked for things like all the time. Like I think the amount of influence that people have towards leaders is high, right? They're always, salespeople are always going after them. Anyone that directly reports to them is somewhat asking something for them, either for something for more resources or to like patch up holes that are currently there, right? So they're being constantly sold to. And I've been seeing this kind of in presentations that I work with on our clients, is like these leadership style presentations when we're giving like updates and things like that. It's kind of like trying to echo back the messages that the leader has been sending around. So it's kind of like you're getting everything that you've said outwards back to you, selling something else back to you, right? It's this kind of interesting cycle, and then you realize that you're in this like interesting echo chamber. So it gets hard to kind of now pull away from that. So if now somebody comes and was like, "Hey, I think we should do something else," that it's hard to pull away, but it's so important because leaders oftentimes hear, "Hey, you want to do X, or the organization wants to achieve X, and I could help you do that by doing this." But we rarely hear is like, "Hey, you all want to do X, right? But have you considered this instead? Because I noticed an opportunity that we could be missing." You know what I mean? So it's being open to that is important.
But all of this really boils down to open and authentic communication with each other. And I want to get your thoughts on this, Pinaki. What do you? So I was thinking about this in terms of, does this look like I'm being a teacher's pet, or is this just me advocating for myself? But I think just kind of touching back on something we were talking about earlier. Um, Instead of just letting the work speak for itself, which I don't think people realize, that's not always the best way, and it's not always the best thing to assume that your manager is going to understand, appreciate, and give credit where credit is due. So, what are your thoughts on that? Like in terms of employees, like being really intentional about self-advocacy and being vocal about their accomplishments, and not waiting until the annual performance review, and just being vocal every time, and almost like quote unquote selling the value of their contributions and getting that credit.
Yeah, it's interesting that it goes into what you were saying earlier from that book that your son was talking about, that never show up your master, which is an interesting choice of words. And it depends on how you think about master. Because when I first thought about it, it was like master as in kung fu master, teaching me master and stuff like that. But then there's this other side of master that you're like, oh, the boss or master slave relationship, which is probably where a lot of management came from. So um, there's a part truth to that, like never show up your master, because it's like so embedded in our history and hierarchy and everything like that. So there is some truth to that. And like it goes with everything that we talk about in influences, because really the idea is to work and align towards a greater good. So it's not about like me looking good or you looking good. It's about like us looking good by going after something greater than that is just us. And I think that's the way we do it. So it's just like, you don't, you know, you know, go at it like, hey, last year I did this, I did this, I did this, I did, you know, things like that. You know, it's kind of like you want to say last year we did this, we did this, we did this, because right, like you want people to feel a part of the team, feel a part of the victory, and things like that, you know, and even acknowledging your managers or your bosses while you do that. So last year we, you know, if there is an I did this, you follow that up. But you know, we could only have got that done because you made X decision. There is things that you want to bring them part of the journey, so they could be part of the team. Because when you're part of like one team, you're all communicating outwards together, right? And that's what we want to achieve, as opposed to, you know, I did this and you're someone else outside of that team, and I'm relying on you to now go and say it more often out there, right? Does that make sense? I'm all about unity here, I guess, you know, a lot.
Uh, I think both on both ends. I think employees and leaders alike can play an active role in talking about what collectively as a team that they're proud of, excited about,
Hmm.
and yeah, I think the role of the employee for sure is always going to be to not only, but I like what you're saying about, you know, we accomplish this together as a team, but at the same time too, I think sometimes that modest contributor
Mm.
who sort of can get lost in the shuffle, where it's like, yeah, Pinaki did all these great things, but really he did so much that led to the success of this project, but he doesn't really talk about it. So the whole team, it just gets kind of washed across. Like we did this as a team when really, because it's like, you know, going back to school, there's those group projects where sometimes the dynamic is the one kid kind of did all of the work and there was one kid that did none of the work, but we're spreading the credit right across anyways. And that one kid that did all the work sometimes and often doesn't get any of the credit. And so it's there still is a like a tricky dynamic to you know, making sure that there's an acknowledgement of people's respective contributions.
It's very true. Like kind of recognizing contributions and things like that is super important. That should be somehow, I believe, baked into the whole culture of everything as well. So everyone kind of like knows. I think what it comes down to is, does it affect kind of promotions and monies and things like that? That's when it gets a little bit like tricky, right? Because the way I've always kind of looked at it when I was in the workforce a very long time ago, I was just there like, you know, it was like, I'm going to do work in such a way where you won't be able to function without me type of mentality, right? Like, and so if I wasn't doing this, you would know it and you would feel it. And that's kind of like, and I don't mean you as in like my boss. I mean like everyone around me. And I guess that's the type of like ambition that I've like come across into the workforce. So it's like I don't have to speak about what I do because it's just like wholeheartedly apparent and shows up in fear as like I take a vacation or something like that. I apologize. That one is like a little bit like showing off my old school arrogance now. But just to kind of give you the thought of it is that like, yeah, I think the idea is to try to set up a scenario where, you know, you are showing up associated with the work that is very successful. The problem goes when you say like, hey, I did this, remember me, remember me. That kind of type of communication is it's kind of like blah. So the more important thing is how can you set up someone else to say, hey, Chris did that, right? And that's what I'm kind of like getting into the place. So it's kind of the PR for yourself, right?
I like that idea because you're right. It never sounds as good when it's you talking about yourself and how great you are. But what does that look like, Pinaki? How do you set up the conditions for getting somebody else to advocate? So let's say there's a team dynamic and there's two team members. It's Pinaki and Chris. You know, Pinaki is managing up really, really well as the teacher's pet. Meanwhile, you know, Chris is doing really, really hard work the entire time, but Pinaki is talking about the things that, as a team, here's the stuff that we're doing. It's amazing. And so there's like
Hmm.
an imbalance in terms of you getting the credit and then also getting the next promotion, versus, Chris did so much of the work and is not as vocal and is kind of shy actually. And then when the promotion announcement comes, what is that? What is that feeling? How does it manifest itself, right?
Yeah, and I think that happens, and I think that happens a lot. And I think there's a certain type of personalities or practices that we do that kind of can allow us to put us into that place, right? And I think for all of I'm just going to use your story, and I apologize for doing this. I feel wrong for doing this, but for all the Pinakis out there as part of that story, I think the goal is to bring up all the Chris Lees, right? Like if you are like finding yourself in this position where you are working with someone, they did a bunch of the work, like it couldn't have been done without them, yet you're getting recognized and promoted because of it. Your onus is now to bring that up, to bring that person up, right? Because the thing is that at the end of the day, s- someone needs to be ascended in order to bring other people up, right? And that's the game we're trying to play here. So it's kind of like really it's about unity and doing that, because there are going to be people who are more shy and who are kind of ready to kind of speak up and just kind of blurt things out. Like I realize that I am the type of person that if I don't control my speak, I won't let other people speak. So I have to slow down and do that myself. Um, but in that same vein, I'm trying to pull other people up as much as I can.
And I also feel like, Pinaki, that people managers and leaders can play a really great role in establishing a foundation of like, great, we did an amazing work as a team. Pinaki just told me of all the great work that you did together as a team. I'd love to hear more about Chris, what you brought to this, and Pinaki, what you brought to this. And it's not in a way to expose anybody, but the idea being more, let's be transparent about how did we achieve this as a team, and then how did who played what role in this success. Um, and I think part of the thing that organizations can do more of is to really set up more of that symbiotic relationship between manager and employees, where employees have as much of a say in evaluating, for example, manager effectiveness, to keep also managers accountable, and look at it more as a partnership and have people managers viewed more as coaches than a top down, I'm your boss, you have to do exactly what I say. And hold accountability, like hold managers accountable for, things like morale, engagement, turnover.
Yeah, that's a very interesting kind of point too, right? The relationship between manager and employee, and a relationship between employee and employee. In that example, I'd caution to be careful of that, like kind of pulling out like, hey, what did you do versus you do? There's like I said, this is a duality here. This is not a this is a very mushy area, but in one aspect, you want to know who contributed more because, the corporate structure is like, hey, somebody has to get promoted. And at the end of the year, somebody gets points associated with them and stuff like that. So there's that. But then there's the other side that's like, you know what? My goal is to create a tight knit team, right? And in order to create a tight knit team, you have to be careful of how you pit people against each other, right? So to kind of like pull out that imbalance in that kind of scenario could lead to this kind of like, okay, it could kind of go run that cycle again. So it's kind of one of those things that we have to really be careful of, as well as like acknowledging, managing up, and things like that. There's this now that you've said it out, now that you've made me think about it, there's this kind of like corporate structure that kind of propels this influence that we talked about earlier, the annual reviews and all of that good stuff, right? And then there's the team dynamic that we have to foster. So it's an interesting dichotomy.
Well,
Dichotomy.
you're so right about, you know being careful about creating division or divisive environments where everyone's just sort of trying to jockey for a position. But I guess the question is, how do you get and how do you help managers avoid kind of playing favorites? Because the bottom line is some people are just going to be more astute at managing up and being teacher's pet and getting and so I love in theory, I love the idea that we come in unified as a team. We win together as a team. We fail together as a team. But I still can't help but think that it still creates a vulnerability for imbalances on that team dynamic as well.
Yeah. That goes right back to where you started actually earlier in this conversation, the diversity aspect. As a leader, I think I don't know if it's taught anywhere or if it's ever going to be taught in this way, but as a leader, you do have to understand the different cultures that are coming together, right? Because and not only cultures, but personality types and the people around you, because like what pulls someone up or gives them energy is going to be different than someone else, right? So even there's some folks on the other side that like, if I give you limelight, you don't like it, right? Because I don't like, there's certain people that don't like that limelight either, but that doesn't mean that they shouldn't get recognized for it, right? So I think that's going to be like key in like shaping up a good team, is like understanding the dynamics of all of the different players, their personalities and their needs, and how can I like pull up based on all of those types of folks, right? Does that make sense, right? Because I talk to people like those are quiet as well. I was like, hey, what's going on? Let me draw it out of you if you're not there. I just don't do it kind of in front of a lot of people, or like, because then that makes it a little awkward.
I mean, really, the premise of our all of our discussions is to remember that at the end of the day, we are human after all, and there are people who have egos and are narcissists, and there are people who think in very many different ways. And it's exactly to your point about that. There's cultural differences, there's personality differences, there's a lot of different kinds of differences, and um, whether we like it or not, as managers, of course, we're going to be more attracted to likable, charismatic people. And that's literally the
Well, people
definition of
like
being
us.
attractive. Or, yeah,
Yeah, people like
exactly.
us. Yeah.
And so I think for me, seminal reading in terms of understanding how to interact with people in general uh, uh, is Dale Carnegie wrote this seminal book, How to Win Friends and Influence People. And there's some great, great ideas for people. It's not always natural for everybody, depending on your personality, but it's a great modus operandi for just how to deal with people, how to interact with people in a way that instantly just makes you a little bit more likable. And I think the employees that have the hardest time are the ones that do amazing work, but they might not be likable, and that might prevent their ability to move ahead in organizations. And it can be a blind spot for certain manager types that don't instantly recognize it as much, right? So I always feel like it's not that everyone's on equal footing, because some people are just better at managing up than others and getting the opportunities that might not be as deserved as others on teams. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, that's what people are looking for, is opportunities to grow and ultimately be appreciated and acknowledged for their work and their contributions.
That is so true. Yeah, I think even in that book, How to Win Friends, by the way, a fantastic book. I think I attribute a lot of where I am today to that book. But I think he even says in there like not to argue, like, and things like that. It's once you start butting heads, it becomes a problem. But the core of it all is building strong relationships in order for you to give feedback openly to each other, right? Like, because when you have a good relationship that's beyond hierarchy and things like that, you're just talking human to human, it's easier to understand and the best way to give feedback and to have trust with each other. And it's like less. I think I would ask questions about the relationship that you have, right? So it's like, if if you and your, like, say, manager, if the person were to leave and get another job, a doper job, would they consider taking you with them if they could? Right? Or, do I feel comfortable calling this person's cell phone like after hours, right? And if it's the answer is no to them, then it's like, yeah, let's kind of deepen the relationship. Let's figure out what's missing from this person's viewpoint, and let's talk about it.
Yeah, let's get to wisdom that feels so right, Pinaki.
That's right.
I think this segment is always a fun one because this is where we can sort of flex on what we've read or what we've seen or articles that we've read. So Pinaki and I, for all of you that are listening, we love having these conversations with you. We love having conversations and sparking dialogue and just kind of provoking different ways of thinking about the workplace. But I really want to give a special thank you to your team at Local Wisdom for making this podcast possible. I know that you and your team are going to do some fun things celebrating your 25th anniversary this year. And, the work that you do at Local Wisdom and localwisdom.com, I think is great. And I'm also especially appreciative to your colleague, Brielle Saracini, for producing this and keeping us out of trouble. And of course, our friends at SBX, Vince, Taylor, Bill, we love you. And so I guess I'll kick off. Like for Wisdom That Feels So Right, I did mention, if you haven't already read it, it's not like a really deep or heavy or lengthy tome, but Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People, I think, is useful for everybody, leaders, employees, alike. Everybody can benefit from this. And then the other one, I think, is Robert Greene, The 48 Laws of Power that we mentioned. I think it is interesting. Like, I would definitely read it, but also understand that this goes more into, Pinaki, what you were sort of talking about in terms of counterpoints, which is it can't just be about individuals trying to jockey for position and try to think about different ways to manipulate and influence. It's just got to be about what does that look like within a team dynamic. And then the other thing I was thinking about, Pinaki, was a lot of these kinds of conversations about cultural dynamic, different leadership styles, things like that. If you haven't been to this conference before, there's a conference it's called Transform. It's at it's usually held in the spring, and I think it's usually in Las Vegas this year. But there's some, lots of like-minded leaders in the HR space, and they do a great job of kind of talking about these dynamics that you and I love to tease on and chat about.
As far as some wisdom that feels right for me, I hope this helps, because I think books are like a window to change your own mindset about these things, and I hope this helps. So one of the ones that came to my mind was Get to the Point. It's Get to the Point, Sharpen Your Message, and Make Your Words Matter by Joel Schwartzberg. Joel is awesome. He's a cool guy and a friend from New York City, and he spent a lot of his life on the debate team. So kind of really talking about how you get to the point, make your point, and things like that. So if we're in the mode of influencing, this is a read. Another one is Extreme Ownership, How U.S. Navy SEALs Led and Win by Jocko Willink. So Jocko tells this really interesting story about if you're not getting what you want from your boss or your manager, it's your fault. And that's the premise of Extreme Ownership. He's like, you have the control over your destiny and your future, and you could do something about it. So it's a great book to do this. And as I was researching this topic, I ran across an interesting TEDx by Elizabeth Sue. She's PhD and has been CEO, CTO, COO, and just leadership for such a long time. But we'll drop the link, but it's an interesting kind of look at what you were saying, what it feels like as a leader when someone is just sucking up to you.
I love that. You must spend a ton of time reading every day. Like, there's so many books that you've read. Obviously, you're passionate about the topic, but you definitely win the prize for just the volumes that you read. I think it's really great.
I try. It's It's funny because I like reading more than podcasts. So it's funny it is. But yeah, with that said, thank you all for listening. Thank you all for joining us at today's podcast. It was a great conversation on managing up and looking at it from different directions, whatnot. Again, thank you to Local Wisdom. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Brielle, and the team at SPX for making this whole thing possible. Let's get out there. And when we're trying to influence each other, just let's think about not as a win-lose thing or a me-you thing. Let's think about it as a win-win-win thing, right? And with that said, peace.